Now a word from this week's sponsor, Onshape. Onshape is the only cloud-native product development platform featuring professional-grade CAD and data management. With Onshape, you no longer need an expensive workstation. All of the heavy lifting is done in the cloud. Things like rendering and creating large assemblies can be done on inexpensive devices. Onshape is a professional tool like SolidWorks. It was actually created by the same founders as SolidWorks. I have used Onshape and it feels just like SolidWorks with all the same commands. So if you're a current SolidWorks user, it's a very easy transition. I highly recommend all the engineers and product developers listening to consider Onshape for their business. You can try it for free at onshape.pro/engineering entrepreneur podcast or click the link in the description.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Engineering Entrepreneur Podcast, episode 127. As always, this is your host, Scott Tercey, and I run CADdesignhelp.com. Please head on over there. There should be a pop-up now that I made, but if not, just go to the Contact Us page, drop in your email there, and when you do, we will send you a free PDF of the top 4 mistakes inventors make. A couple other tidbits. I do have a new online course about how to, if you're an engineer listening, how you want to become an engineering entrepreneur like myself. Head over to my website and go to the Engineeringpreneur course page. And I'd like to get a few more reviews on iTunes if you can do it. And if you want any feedback, you can contact me, info@CADdesignhelp.com. All right, so this week we have Ravi, who is the CEO and founder of Sutro, which is a water chemistry monitor company. Right now they just have one product, which is measuring chemistry in swimming pools, but they're going to expand beyond that. So, Ravi, thanks for coming on the show. Why don't you give us a little background about yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a ton for having me on the show, Scott. I was born and raised down in Southern California. Imagine sunny SoCal, living really close to Los Angeles. My dad actually had a chain of pool and spa supply stores. And so growing up throughout high school, I did everything from testing people's water to running acid washes. At one point in time, I even had my own little pool route, and I used to drive around that little pickup truck and clean people's pools. And after going to get a degree in mechanical engineering, I worked at NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratories for a short stint. I just kind of really got tired of the kind of being kind of a cog in the wheel, and I ended up going to getting my MBA. And after that, kind of this idea hit me that, what if I could take everything that my dad used to do at the pool and spa stores and stick it inside of a robot? And we basically did exactly that. So we took that small little test kit that you see, and we shoved it inside of a robot that floats inside of your swimming pool or spa, and it tells you exactly what chemicals to put in. And the way that we've designed it allows us to actually scale the technology outside of pool and spas into much larger markets like drinking water, agriculture, and food and beverage. And so that's kind of the quick and dirty on who I am, how the idea of Sutro came about to be, and where we're at right now.
Yeah, so I do have a little bit of experience with the pool and the chemicals and stuff. So I grew up in Pittsburgh. I guess it doesn't really matter where I grew up, but we had a pool. We were lucky enough that we had a house with a pool, not until I was like 11, 12. But I remember, part of that was like you had to constantly remember to check this water. If you didn't, you could have all kinds of like weird issues. Like I remember once we didn't check or the balance wasn't right of the pH, and like there was all this algae growing in there. It was really gross. And then it was like really cloudy one time because of something else was out of whack. Like it was really hard to get it to be like nice and crystal clear and clean all the time, and like you constantly had to monitor it. So I can see this being a nice advantage because I looked at your website and you have an app and everything. So I'm assuming you can just log in anytime and look at it, but I'm also assuming that you would have alerts set up. So if something's dropping out of balance, it's going to give you that alert. They say, hey, you need to add whatever, this chlorine, this chemical, that chemical, or you're going to have issues. And that just makes it so much easier because, people are busy. And even if you like do remember to check it all the time, maybe you're going to be doing it too late. And so, it makes it a lot simpler than having to just like go out there and manually. And then also just like the process of checking it was not like overly difficult, but you had to like take a sample of the water in like a little, like it had like 5 or 4 different like tubes. And then you had to add like yellow drops to the one side, red drops to the next one, and green to the next one, and like shake it up and wait for it. And I mean, it took like 10 minutes to do all that. even sometimes then you couldn't really, because you're just using this color test, you couldn't really tell 100%, like, is this too dark of a yellow? Is this like out of range? Like yours is all digital, so it's all being monitored automatically. So it's like you don't have to even think about trying to look at the color and interpret where your range is. Like it's already telling you that.
Scott, I should hire you on our marketing team, because that is entirely the problem that we solve and exactly what we do.
I have
100%.
I have been working on my marketing skills. I've been taking a course because as an engineer, this is a weakness. And I said, you know what? That's low-hanging fruit. So a little advice to the audience, work on your weakest link and you get the biggest bang for your time there.
Entirely, yeah. But back to your point, that's exactly what we do, right? If you go back to your pool days, like you mentioned, right? There's the test kit, and then you take that sample of water, you put in the colors, the different drops. Do you even know what the color is? And then actually the hardest part comes about, right? So fine, you did the test, you know what the colors are. The question is, how much of this chemical do I put in? And that's the kind of real problem that we solve, right? So not only do we do the testing on a recurring basis, but the iOS and Android application that you have on your phone literally tells you the exact chemical that you have in your garage and how much of that to put in. And the reason that we know that is because when you pick up the iOS, Apple or Android app, you scan the chemicals that you have in your garage. And so we have over 2,000, 2,500 chemicals in our database. You just scan that barcode and it'll pull up a pretty little picture and it says, hey, we just registered that you have this chemical. The next time something goes out of whack, we'll tell you exactly how much of this to put inside.
Okay. That's smart. I did have a question just right off the bat when I was looking at your website and reviewing how it worked. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be in like the next iteration. Why not just have the chemicals in the robot and inject them into the pool as needed so that the level just stays there? And I'm guessing it's just a matter of engineering complexity and you wanted to get to market, make some money to invest into this upgraded version.
Yeah, that's one answer to it. Kind of the second answer to it is the volume of water, right? Because the Sutro floats in a 1,000-gallon jacuzzi and a 25,000-gallon pool all the way to a 50,000-gallon Olympic pool, each of those volumetric differences in the pool volume gauge how much chemicals you put in, right? And so you can't make a one-size-fit-all sensor.
Right, yeah.
Sensor.
So that size cylinder might work in terms of the chemical storage and you need to have enough. Like it'd be pointless to have this feature if the amount of chemical can only be used for a week. Like you don't want to have to go in and refill it that often or even less than that. So it's like,
if you remember your pool, you probably picked up a 50-pound bucket of chlorine, right, that you kept in your garage. We can't have a 50-pound or even a 25-pound, floating thing that's floating around your swimming pool with chemicals in them. We're going to put that in line. So actually a direct answer to your question is we're working with chemical companies to pipe in the Sutro for pools that already make chemical dosing systems, right? Liquid chlorine dosing, tablet dosing.
Okay. So yeah, these kind of pools have a line that goes to where these chemicals are, and like your system would basically be the interface of like the logic of like test if this level is too low, release this, and so on. So it wouldn't even be in the pool at that point. It would just be, like you said, you tie it directly into the line that comes out of the pool.
Exactly. Yeah, okay. Exactly.
Very cool. So one thing I like to talk about, especially with inventor episodes like this, is the process of like, okay, from napkin sketch to bring it to market. We don't have to go through every little thing, but I think like the newbie inventors, this is a really good thing to listen to because this will answer a lot of their questions and they'll see how much trial and error, how much work it is to actually accomplish this, because especially with something that's pretty complex like this, I imagine there was quite a bit of like prototype after prototype. And I want to hear like the highlights of basically, like I said, go from the napkin sketch concept that you told me about earlier to where you guys are now.
Yeah, entirely. So I think I would break this down into four phases, right? So phase one is legitimately the validation of your idea, right? Without you even putting pen to paper, you want to see if this is really a problem, right? You want to go into customers' homes and you want to see, would they pay for something that remotely measures their water chemistry, tells them what chemicals to put in, and then potentially auto orders the chemicals for them. And so before we even spent $1 on, making a 3D printed prototype or looking at electronics or taking probes out. We legitimately opened up Google Maps and we turned on satellite view and we went to one of the most wealthiest neighborhoods in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And we could, you could literally see people's pools in their backyard, right? If you're on Google Maps.
I love this because that is so, okay. I'm all about doing things at the low cost level, but like effective level. And like, this is by far the smartest thing I've heard today, maybe this week, because yeah, you could probably go buy some lists from someplace of people that have pools, but it's like, dude, the information is like easily available online if you just kind of think outside the box for a minute, because yeah, from a satellite view, pools are super easy to see. And it also is smart to go to the highest end neighborhood because, at the end of the day, like people that are trying to save a buck are going to do that work, right? But very rich people that don't want to do it, that have disposable income, like they definitely are the target market. So it was smart to like go there, in addition to the fact that everybody had a pool as well, makes it easy. You just go door to door. You don't have to like walk here. Then, there's only one pool in the neighborhood and you have to drive to another neighborhood. So
that's exactly what we did, right? So then we went, we picked, 20 homes, 25 homes, whatever that is. And then we just knocked on their doors and we were like, hey, we're a startup out of San Francisco. We have this novel idea of, this robotic sensor. Would you be interested in it? And what was really interesting is actually a handful of them are like, hey, I have a pool guy. I do this myself. I'm totally fine. I don't need help. I'm just busy. I don't feel like talking to you, right? A lot of doors get slammed in your face. They think you're a telemarketer or something.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, I had a stint where I was like trying to like working for like a roofing company, just a little side job. And it's like people won't even give you like 2 minutes to pitch them. So I applaud the hustle because it is like annoying how you got to knock on 10 doors. Only 2 people even give you a minute to talk.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's just the game of numbers at that point in time. It's a game of probability and a game of numbers. Is how many doors can you knock on so you get a sample size that's enough so you feel confident that this idea has legs. And what basically happened is there was, three people that were like, hey, I would totally do this. How much does it cost? And, we were just doing interviews. We didn't even have a product. We don't have anything really ready. And I kind of just, off the top of my head from being in the pool store was like, it's going to be $3.99, right? The guy immediately starts, taking out his checkbook or credit card information. And I'm like, hey, give us a week. We'll get you something in your pool, but we don't, we're still working on something. You can't be like, hey, we have nothing. And, we can't really get to you. So what we did the next week was we actually just took a regular chlorine floater and we said, hey, this is a prototype. It was obviously a decoy. And we just want to put this in your pool because we want somebody to realize that they have something that they can trust that's floating in their backyard. But from my days as a pool boy, I was kind of like, hey, I'm going to have to come by just as a pool boy would, but except for I'm going to be double testing your water and I'm going to be checking on, this so-called device. We don't have an app ready. And so I'm going to, the system will text you the chemicals that you need. And then just when you're done, text back, a thumbs up or an okay when you're done. And we did that. We scaled those 3 pools at $399 per beta to about 25 pools. And that gave us enough.
Oh, so you did charge
background.
them the $400 for this like fake device, but you guys were manually actually checking it. The device wasn't doing anything really.
Exactly. Yeah, but we needed a decoy because if we didn't have that in there, they would just think we're a pool service, right? We need that.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
And we're not in there to mess up their pool, right? We don't want to lie to them to be like, hey, we're not going to check your chemistry. We wanted to get the job done, but we wanted them to instill trust in something that's floating.
Real quick question on this now, because I understand what you were doing, but you can't sustain this forever coming by twice a week to check it. How did you handle the situation once this testing phase was done after a few weeks and it's like, hey, they expect this thing to keep checking their pool and it's not really doing it?
Yeah, we refunded everybody's money. We took back all the devices and we said, thank you for getting this. As we come out with version 2, we're going to go ahead and, let you know how we progress.
So they they weren't really aware that it was like a temporary payment. They thought they were getting this thing and like you had to kind of come up with an excuse of like, hey, like it wasn't working as good as we thought. We're just going to give you your money back. And then no one's going to really complain.
No, we did say it was going to be a beta test and that, this is going to kind of fund the entire operation and, we'll let you know how this progresses on a week-by-week basis. We're very upfront with the impermanence of us, not continuing this forever.
Oh, but you still refunded all their money. So you guys didn't actually like create any revenue out of that actually.
Correct, because the goal wasn't revenue, it was to validate the idea, right? That was the phase one, is make sure that people actually want to buy the thing.
That is a lot of money that could have funded like a lot of the development costs. So had it been kind of hard, I guess you had to give it back, but it was kind of probably hard to do that because that would fund quite a bit in my mind.
Entirely. And so that moves us to phase two, right? Once we validated that there was actually a market there, that people actually had interest, we could literally show that people transacted money, although it was refunded. We can show that particular amount of time was allotted. This is how the demo run. We then started looking at technologies. That's when we put napkin sketch to paper. And from a prototyping perspective, the spectrum ranged on one side of what's called easy, which is off-the-shelf probes that, currently exist in the market, all the way to something that's, custom, right, that we would have to build the sensor ourselves. So initially, we tried actually taking an off-the-shelf sensor. There was a competitive product that was in the market that we kind of, worked along with and also piggybacked off of their sensor. And one thing we realized with just water chemistry analysis is if you use those solid-state sensors, they begin to drift over time, right? The values that come out of them change. And so when your pH is 7.2 one day, maybe in the course of 3 weeks, that same 7.2 will read an 8.2, which are two very different inputs on the amount of chemicals you need to output. And so at some point in time, it just becomes garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, because isn't pH a logarithmic scale, so a difference of 1 is actually a difference of 10.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And so then we kind of, went back to the drawing board, and we went back and said, what do people do today, right? The sensor stuff is cool. We see that in labs, but it's not calibrated. They drift over time. We literally went back to the basics. We went back to first principles, and we said exactly what you said at the beginning of this call, right? That you go out there as a pool owner with a test kit. You have that little color test kit. You take a sample of water, and you put 5 of the red drops and 5 of the yellow drops. But building something that is a dropper is going to be massive in size, right? If you really wanted to fill that much liquid inside there to test one time a day for 30 days, literally our first prototype was, a Home Depot garden box. And we had legitimately just taken that same test kit that you had off of, we took it off Amazon, and we bought 10 bottles. We put a small little peristaltic pump in the red liquid and the yellow liquid and the blue liquid. And then we just had a plastic chamber in the middle that had hoses that went to a pool, sucked up the water, and did the exact same thing that you would do as a pool owner. And so that kind of moves into, what the phase 3 would be. Phase 1 was market validation. Phase 2 is kind of what I would call building the big and ugly prototype, right? Build something that is a proof of concept that works. Phase 3 moves into actual commercial viability, right? So now when you take this Home Depot-sized garden box that's, 3 feet by 2 feet wide by, 3 feet tall, nobody's going to have that thing floating by the side of their pool or sitting by the side of their pool. And so then we went through an experiment of basically, downsizing. And so we searched far and wide, and we arrived at technology from the medical industry, which is microfluidics, right? For those many engineers that are listening to this, microfluidics are really, really tiny liquids. And basically what we did was we, said, honey, I shrunk the test kit. We took that test kit that you have by your pool, and instead of taking, 50 microliters of water, we take something that's the size of your fingernail, and instead of putting in 5 drops of that red liquid, we take 1/50th of a drop. And so now we've shrunk down the entire thing to fit into a digestible form factor that can actually float at your pool, which actually moves us into phase 4 of now how do you make tens of hundreds of thousands of units of this, at which point in time we then spent, probably 30% of our initial time in China working with the manufacturer, because what you can make at home in your garage where you, screwed the screws down and you kind of make everything one-off needs to be scaled and needs to be built into standard operating procedures that workers can do, that people can do. And so that's kind of the 4 phases of what I would call from prototype to commercial viability.
Okay. Yeah, that was a pretty good explanation of it. The sensor technology, how does it work? Is it actually is it similar to like what like a human would do, where it's recognizing the actual color with drops, or is it totally different where it's just directly measuring the chemistry of the water in some other way?
Yeah, it's exactly what the human does. Kind of like I said, from our phase 1 to our phase 2, our process of quote unquote directly measuring chemistry moved to that first principles of just shrinking the test kit. And so the best way to understand it is, what do you do when you take the test kit? You take a sample of water, right? You put your hand inside there. You literally take a sample of water. You then put 5 drops of that red liquid. You shake it up. You look at the color of the water with the red drops of liquid and compare it against the standard red. And depending on where it is against that standard, you'll then make a deduction that, this is a pH of 7.8. That's exactly what we do. So instead of taking 5 drops, the floating sensor will suck up a really small amount of water. It doses 1/50th, 1/50 amount of the red liquid, the same red liquid that you have at your home. We shake it up inside of that robot, and then we look at a color array. We have basically an LED and a sensor array that looks at a series of colors the way that the human eye generally does, but much, much, much dumber. And then those color values go to the cloud, which then analyzes in the cloud what the pH is, and we give you a very simple output on your Apple or Android device that says, hey, your pH is 7.8. Are you red, yellow, green? And what do you need to do?
Okay, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I think this is why, your values wouldn't drift. I'm kind of curious why the other company's thing drifted. It has to be doing a totally different way of measuring the pH and stuff.
It uses a technology called a glass bulb probe. And so if you envision like a glass water bottle, right? Inside of the glass water bottle, the glass itself is the membrane. So imagine that glass water bottle dunked inside of your sample water, inside of your pool. There's water, or there's a liquid on the inside, and then your pool water is on the outside of the glass membrane. What ends up happening is, against different pH values, that liquid on the inside of the glass water bottle is sensitive and outputs a millivolt value, outputs some sort of electrical signal. And so basically what I'm defining is a really, really small battery, right? And so what ends up happening is you get this concept called ion stick, right?
It's almost like a galvanic, what do they call it? Galvanic response with 2 metals of different, and it's and you can actually create a little current.
And then over time, those get charged in the wrong direction, right? Which kind of then gives a little bit of a fluctuation. But if your entire sensor is relying on electrical signals, that little fluctuation affects your signal.
Yeah, for sure. It's the sensitivity is too close to what it's measuring. It's there's too much noise in the system, in other words, yeah.
Exactly, which is actually why they use them in laboratory equipment a lot. They're actually beautiful sensors. I wouldn't doubt them at all. They're just not made for the consumer grade market. It's just the wrong market for those sensors to be in.
Okay.
Entirely. Yeah, you're correct.
Very cool. I think you explained it really well. You went through how you guys ramped it up and everything. Did you, as far as funding, did you guys get investors or Kickstarter? This sounds like a perfect product for Kickstarter, actually. I'd be kind of surprised if you didn't do one.
Yeah, we actually did I forget, did we do Indiegogo or Kickstarter back in the day? This was in 2016. And then we did the TechCrunch Hardware Battlefield. So we were actually one of the finalists back when they were doing that at Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show at CES. And then we ended up raising close to, I think, $1.8 or $2 million all said and done, including in-kind as well as real capital, until we got acquired about 4 years ago by a large chemicals company in Canada.
Oh, interesting. Do you care to tell a story about that? I think that could be interesting for some people, about getting acquired and how that went down. And, do you guys still work for the company, or did you just exit out? Well, it sounds like you still work for them, but what about the other founders?
Yeah, definitely. The core engineering team does still work with the acquirer. The acquirer is great. I would definitely say I've heard horror stories on one side. I think I would claim this as a positive story. They've put in the necessary financial capital. Probably a lot of founders out there, engineers know hardware is hard, right? It just takes more money because you have to literally make a physical product. And so they've been extremely supportive, both from understanding the market, because they sell chemicals into the pool industry. And that just, gives a great partnership for us to better understand the market, as well as them giving the kind of financial and operational prowess for us to kind of scale upwards.
Yeah, for sure. It makes sense to do that. And I guess then you guys just stayed on as like employees in like that company then?
Correct. Yeah, we're just employees. Sutro is a wholly owned subsidiary of Sandy Mark in Canada, and they've kept us, I would say at like an arm's length from a brand perspective. So we do kind of get to say in building out the product the way that we do in the U.S. But other than that, they've been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So it sounds like they own you guys as a subsidiary corporation, but like you're the CEO, you're making the decisions day to day. You're like deciding how to move forward, maybe with some input from their CEO, but you're like still sort of in charge.
Yeah, that's correct. I definitely run day-to-day operations, and then check in with them monthly, quarterly, yearly, as you would with any other investor or kind of board meetings. And so there definitely is accountability and responsibility from their side, including mine.
Very cool. All right, so probably in about 30 minutes. Let's get towards wrapping up. You got a lot of experience in all kinds of things: engineering, marketing, starting a company, selling a company. What's your kind of your best top tip for the audience here? From like lessons learned, just whatever comes to mind as like your number one tip.
Yeah, I think lessons learned are, as a founder, your number one thing that you're continuously doing is you're managing risk, right? You're managing risk across everything, across your employees or around the people that you have around you, across your investors, across the customers, across the product that you're building. And so if you begin to look at your business and your role as somebody that just mitigates and solves for risk, everything becomes kind of that much more easier, right? Because you can kind of view that within that lens. That would be kind of number one. And then I think the second thing is your most important resource and asset is people, right? People buy your product. People work with you. They work for you. People give you money. So the quicker and the more efficient you are at understanding people and getting out there and talking to people, the better it's going to be, because honestly, you can't build this thing alone.
No, great advice. And lastly, contact info. If people want to contact you or the company, what is the best way?
Yeah, the best way to contact us is if you just email hello, HELLO, at mysutro, that's MYSUTRO.com. It should get to me, and if none of you guys say that you heard us on the podcast, the customer service team will definitely forward me the email.
Perfect. All right, Ravi, that was a great talk, and that's all I got. So we'll catch everyone next time on the Engineering Entrepreneur Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
Now a word from this week's sponsor, Onshape. Onshape is the only cloud-native product development platform featuring professional-grade CAD and data management. With Onshape, you no longer need an expensive workstation. All of the heavy lifting is done in the cloud. Things like rendering and creating large assemblies can be done on inexpensive devices. Onshape is a professional tool like SolidWorks. It was actually created by the same founders as SolidWorks. I have used Onshape, and it feels just like SolidWorks with all the same commands. So if you're a current SolidWorks user, it's a very easy transition. I highly recommend all the engineers and product developers listening to consider Onshape for their business. You can try it for free at onshape.pro/engineering entrepreneur podcast, or click the link in the description.